I'm Sarah Nagel, and I've spent my career leading research and product development within some of the world's largest brands.
And I'm Chad Reynolds. I'm a serial entrepreneur and founder and CEO of Verve.
And this is AI Powered by People.
Each episode will dive into the latest AI developments and talk to an industry leader to help you better understand and utilize AI.
We'll take you inside some of the world's most famous companies and share examples of how AI is improving innovation, consumer engagement, media, and marketing.
No matter what industry you work in, we'll help you navigate one of the biggest disruptions to organizations and people today.
Hey, Chad, how's it going? It is awesome to be here in Cincinnati this week with the team.
Yeah, and you just missed National Chili Day. So I don't know if you know much about Cincinnati, but they take a lot of pride in their chili. You haven't had it yet, right?
I have not had it. I'm not a huge chili fan, but I feel like if I'm here, I should try it.
Yeah. So after this, I know where we're headed to.
Okay.
So
also, just to make note too, we are in the same building, but we are in different floors right now. But we're
running out of
making it
space.
work.
We're running out of space. Yeah. Awesome.
Well, we have an awesome episode. So coming up, we're going to be talking to Fred Schonenberg, who is the founder and CEO of VentureFuel, which we're going to learn more about. But first, let's talk about what we're seeing in the headlines. So up first, ChatGPT this week went off the rails and people are freaking out about it. That's what the headlines are saying. So ChatGPT unexpectedly began spouting off gibberish a couple days ago, leading, people are super concerned about what that means. It's because it's gone rogue. So lots of different posts to social media. An example was a garbled mix of Spanish and English. And some people are asking, this makes no sense. Like, what's going on? So what do you think about this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all have to remember that ChatGPT is software, and software has bugs. And so, there was bugs reported on the from the network, from the platform, from the company. And so on the 20th, they issued, following this, they issued a postmortem on their site around the incident, saying that there was, in fact, a bug that was affecting how the model processes language. And so a lot of users experienced the result of that language, which was kind of like a mix of different words together that didn't necessarily make sense. So the bug has been fixed and deployed, and we're kind of back to normal. But again, it's software. Software has bugs sometimes. So
totally. I'm surprised it has taken this long for something like this to happen,
Yeah.
So I'm sure it will happen again in another situation too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Also this week, Google paused Gemini AI image generator after it created inaccurate historical pictures. So on Thursday, it said it was pausing Gemini, the image generator, because of inaccuracies in historical photos. It was posted all over social media. There was this one particular search around the U.S. founding fathers, but it came out with people of color, and folks were calling it inaccurate. So they paused it to kind of re-release an improved version. So what do you think about this?
Well, I think we're as we're using all these different tools and software, I think there's becoming a difference between what your intent is with the platform, right? So if you're going through, for instance, Google search, you're searching for historical images, things that have happened. There's illustrations of this, paintings of this. I said photos of this.
I'd love to see photographs.
I was like, I don't think there are photos of this. But these are things that have already happened versus, more generative platforms, which are more predictive of things that haven't necessarily happened yet. They're based off of some reference material, but you can change the weights on all these different things. So I think just keeping in mind, the intent of, generative is, for things that haven't necessarily happened yet, you're kind of creating them on the fly, and you can change the weights and all these things versus going to historical texts or textbooks or things like that. These are images that were created a long time ago. So I'm sure there's going to be just more and more stories around this of just like how you're using tools and what your intent is and what you expect to get back in that. But I'm sure it's also reflective of some of the, LLMs, I guess, kind of trying to impact and change some of the, racial biases that have been reported, through that, and changing the weights on some of these things as well. What do you
Yeah.
think?
Well, it's it's an example. I think with because it's just like this is like more of like a hot topic. But like I'm thinking about some of the images I've tried to create where I think I told you like I wanted my bulldog like rolling off a couch or something like
I
that.
remember that you tried it on Pico, right?
I tried it on Pika, but it's all about the prompts that you're giving it. It's all about how much detailed information you're giving these generated tools. So if it's really light on the prompts that you're giving it, it's really up to kind of it feels almost randomized sometimes the
Right.
information that comes out, because you could ask that same question again and a totally different image would come out. So it's
Okay.
really about like honing that prompt information you're putting in to be more specific about what you really want to come out of these image generation tools.
Yep.
And then for our last story, we're going to be bringing on Steve Berkowitz, who is our producer and editor. He lives in Los Angeles, and he has some comments about this last story around Tyler Perry not wanting to.
Comments are an understatement. So that's why we wanted to bring him on. So usually Steve's behind the scenes, and we're like, Steve, you might want to, maybe we can pull you in front of the camera a little bit.
Well, sure. I mean, it's no secret. Tyler Perry, a huge job creator. And I think that's a reason why this is such a big story. He has the sprawling 330-acre studio in Atlanta, and which is, really changed the setting in, it's Hollywood South. And looking at what happened with Sora, decides not to build an $800 million expansion of the studio. And this hit the Hollywood Reporter and has caused a big uproar, naturally, because the jobs that his studio, which was built out of an army base, what the opportunities that has created with, all of his movies, all of his TV shows is enormous. And the new property, what that was going to do in terms of job creation would be incredible. And so now to look at what Sora is about to do, to look at that, what came out, and to make such a big decision, I think says a lot about what someone who is as influential as Tyler Perry is. I think that's a little concerning for a lot of people. And for me, just looking at the article, when he says, it's going to touch every corner of the industry, that is where, he's saying grip and electric, he's saying editors, he's saying actors. That's where it gets to like, okay, it's not just going to be one or two people. We're talking about a lot of folks who are going to be impacted by something like Sora.
Now, I would be remiss if I did not mention the other reason that Tyler Perry may be making this decision. And it's a much more practical, less sexy reason than AI. Very recently, the Georgia state legislature has made a proposed bill. They have a proposal in the state legislature to limit the state's very lucrative film and TV tax incentive, which, if you don't know, Georgia has the largest production tax incentive in the country, with roughly $1.24 billion in credits certified last year, 2023. The proposed legislation would limit the amount of credits that can be transferred in a year, and this proposed bill would establish modest requirements to claim the full amount, 30% of in-state production costs, instead of the 20% base. So if you don't know, a ton of shows and movies are shot in Georgia specifically because of the tax incentive. So this, more than AI, could be behind this decision, but I don't know. I'm just speculating.
I went to a panel this week with a bunch of writers. Obviously, there was going to be a question. You knew there was going to be a question. Somebody was going to ask about AI. No one on the panel had an answer. No
comments either. Like they didn't have any thoughts on it.
They had thoughts, but it was all very much like, well, people are going to want stories written by human beings. An AI doesn't know what it's like to have a first kiss. An AI doesn't know what it's like to have.
I don't know what it's like to have a first kiss, Steve.
Still waiting.
Still waiting. Still, yeah, right here waiting for you.
Right. Yeah.
Richard Marx.
Richard Marx.
Yeah.
Yes, that is really
Sorry,
dating.
I'm not going to get that out of my head today.
Really dating yourself, but
yeah, it's true.
Look, I'm just an unscripted producer, but I know what's coming. And the three of us have talked about what 11 Labs, is doing in terms of the audio dupes. And then what I think everybody was kind of blown away with how cinematic Sora looked.
And for those who are playing catch up, so OpenAI released Sora, which is their text to video model. So essentially just using text prompts. And again, Sarah just talked to this in the previous stories.
Like 60-second videos based on those text prompts.
Yeah, and they feel cinematic. You can put yourself in different locations throughout the world. Mm-hmm. You can incorporate all kinds of details. Again, these were demos. These weren't like, giving you the text field to go create yet. Mm-hmm. But, making an $800 million investment in physical, the kind of physical creation or physical spaces to create within versus empowering everybody with essentially a keyboard to generate realistic looking scenes. And not just like frame at a frame, like frame by frame. It's like 60 seconds at a time.
Yeah, the resolution is insane.
I think in terms of, whether it's animation or just saving money on locations, I think that is what is going through somebody like his head. And even, I'm looking at it, and Chad, I've talked about this, whether you can do it in a documentary because it's not 100% real, that I'm not sure yet. But that kind of is that next step of, okay, is an audience willing to accept that maybe this is scraped across the internet from different pieces, and now I'm seeing an aerial of what I'm okay with. This is Tokyo. Okay, that's fine. I understand that it's bits and pieces across the internet or across hundreds of videos of movies and TV shows. This is Tokyo. I understand that, and I'm okay with it. And there's a mark that says AI generated, but that saves someone like me from hiring a crew to use a drone in Tokyo to shoot that footage. Is that okay? And I think that, in a scripted movie, like what somebody like Tyler Perry is doing, they need that and they have a bigger budget. But for someone like me in the unscripted world, that's a huge money saver.
Yeah.
And I think those are the discussions we'll have to have in the next year.
Well, to build on that, so us three will be in South by Southwest in a few weeks.
I'm going?
You're going, yeah.
You're coming.
Going.
You're going to be there.
I think Frontier goes there. I'm just kidding. Yes, you're going. We're going to be broadcasting from down there. We've got a house set up. We got some space kind of at South by Southwest. We're going to dig into really just this unique combination of technology, film, music. I mean, really technology and entertainment, and the consumer.
Comedians. I am really hoping for some comedians.
Yeah,
to interact with them.
Yeah, it's got to be better than the dry humor and dad jokes you get from myself.
Awesome. Okay, now let's get to our interview with Fred Schonenberg, who's the founder and CEO of VentureFuel. VentureFuel is a company that connects large organizations with entrepreneurs to ignite innovation. He's also hosted the podcast VentureFuel Visionaries. You ready?
Let's do it.
Hey, Fred, welcome to the podcast. Where are you calling in from today?
Brooklyn, New York. It's good to see you both.
Hey.
Good to see you. Brooklyn. I didn't realize you were in Brooklyn.
Yeah, I moved out. I mean, I went from Manhattan to Brooklyn, which to me was like a very traumatic experience. I swore I would never leave the island of Manhattan, but my wife is from Brooklyn. And as soon as I got here, I was like, I can't believe I did not move here sooner. So yeah, I love it here.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think the best way to start this is to hear a bit about you and your background and what led you to VentureFuel.
Yeah, it sounds great. So I launched VentureFuel 10 years ago, a couple of weeks ago. So we just had our 10th anniversary. And the whole idea is, how do we help large organizations innovate better, faster, and accelerate their growth? And I believe the secret to doing that is actually partnering with startups and new technologies. And it all kind of came about very organically. I was running a different company, and I was selling to very large, Fortune 500s, and they kept saying, "What's next?" And I was like, "Why don't you just buy the thing I'm selling you?" And after I got over that heartbreak, I was like, "Well, wait a second, don't you pay McKinsey or Boston Consulting Group like $1 billion to figure out what's next?" And they're like, "Yeah, but it's very academic. It's sort of like, here are the things you could do and you should do, but not how do you do them and how do you do them now." And on the flip of that realization, I had a friend actually a little brother of a friend of mine, who I went to dinner with just to hear about his startup and catch up. And he spent the whole dinner complaining he couldn't get a meeting with the same people that were saying, "What's next?" And so I had this moment of like, oh, these are like two people that should be dating, but they either don't speak the same language, or they're in the wrong bar. They don't know of each other. There's got to be some connective tissue. And that started the sort of journey that became VentureFuel, which is, sort of the intersection between corporates, business challenges, innovation, VCs, and startup founders, and sort of connecting those three dots together.
Yeah, I thought he was going to say we're the Tinder for enterprises and startups, but
you know what?
Glad he didn't.
Yes, you know what I would say is not Tinder, but what's the one where it was like you had to answer like 800 questions, and it did like a scientific matchmaking of like, we know eHarmony. We're more the eHarmony than the Tinder. We're not in the like startup petting zoo game where it's like you're just swiping left or right, whichever direction. But yes, there's definitely a matchmaking part of this. And I think there's also a corporate strategy piece, which is like, what are you actually trying? What problem are you trying to solve? Why aren't you solving it yourself? What's the value of that? And then to kind of reverse engineer from that desired outcome and find the startup or new technology that's out there that can help you do it better, faster. And by the way, it's totally self-serving for the startup who's trying to scale and needs enterprise case studies and corporate deals in order to raise the next round of funding. So it's a very sort of, it's almost like a flywheel, but the three pieces, when they push each other, it doesn't work, right? So we kind of help connect the bumps that are in there and really help it work for everybody involved.
Can you share some examples of some of the matchmaking that you are doing? So some of the startups with some of the larger organizations that you work with?
Yeah. And you and I have talked about this before. Is one of the things that's hard for me from a marketing standpoint is a lot of what we do is stealth. It is viewed as competitive advantage for our corporate clients. So we can't speak to all of them. That said, we have some that are public, which are nice because I can speak more freely. We do a lot of work with Comcast. We just announced about 2 weeks ago our third AI focused accelerator with them. This one's around vertical AI. And we've done one with Gen AI and enterprise AI. And so with that, they've identified that AI in multiple sort of forms is a real business use case that they want to invest in, that they care about, that's important to their business. And we're out finding solutions and startups that can plug back in and solve those. And then we've created almost like a sprint boot camp for commercialization. So you have a really interesting startup that can solve one of the problems. How do you actually get that deal done with a company as large as Comcast? Anybody listening that has any biz dev background or sales, it's a nightmare. You have to find the right person at the right time in the right budget cycle. Then you have to go legal, procurement, and you're 18 months from your first meeting till like getting to negotiation. And so we're like, how can we take that and condense it down into 4 weeks? And so both parties benefit by that being faster, more streamlined, and really tied to somebody that has a problem and a budget. So we do that with everyone from Dick's Sporting Goods, ARP Foundation, Comcast, to the state of California, and dairy farmers. So we're across all different industries, but really always starting with that. What is that business challenge that the larger organization is trying to solve?
Yeah, I heard through friends that you have a lot of milk swag from like a recent company working with the milk
This is
industry.
video, so you should have worn all of your dairy gear.
Got milk.
Oh,
Yeah.
dude, let me tell you this. So the California Milk Advisory Board are the most lovely human beings on the planet. They are so fun. We're year 6 of our program with them. During the pandemic, we actually, nobody could do anything in person. So we ran this as a dairy product innovation competition. And all our judges were spread across the US. So we actually had shipments of these products get sent to each judge. And of course, I had to have them sent to my house as well. And there's 16 finalists, I think 12 or something that year. I don't know, whatever it was. 8 of them were ice cream related. So, and they sent like, pints and pints and pints of ice cream. So my wife jokes that like one morning, like the UPS or FedEx person just like ringing the bell. And it's just ice cream started stacking all throughout our house. And then it was like cheese and butter and all this stuff. And she's like, this is awesome. Like so insane. So we've done that. We now do it in person out in California. So my swag games come down slightly in terms of actually like samples, but we've got some pretty cool, branded things along those lines as well.
I'm holding back so many jokes on all the dairy consumption, but
dude, I'm telling you, if you want ice cream though, I could talk to you about ice cream for way too long.
So now you're in the dairy, you're in ice cream matchmaking service. I like that.
I'm telling you, from like, we literally had 2 programs going simultaneously a while back. We were looking at autonomous robot delivery. Mm-hmm. Sorry, 3. We were looking at really deep tech material science, like membranes and like adhesives at like the molecular level. And then we had an ice cream competition all at the same time. So in a lot of ways, VentureFuel is probably the weirdest place to work and also the most fun, because at any given time, like we are really stretching our minds into like the future edges of all these different industries. And they're all different and all really exciting.
That's awesome. And also one of the things that you do, and I've listened to it before, is you have a podcast, VentureFuel Visionaries. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. I don't know why I'm talking about the pandemic so much, but when the pandemic started, I hate when people talk about it. It's like, okay, let's move forward. But here we go. I kind of was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? A big part of our sales strategy as an organization is to go meet with people in person in conferences, do dinners. And that was like, I just sat down and briefed the company on like, we're doubling down on in-person events. And it was like, nope, you sure aren't. And so I was like, oh, what am I going to do? Why would anyone talk to me at this point? The whole world's collapsing. And I was like, oh, maybe there's an opportunity here to start to interview some thought leaders in this corporate innovation, corporate venturing space, and just ask them why would you ever work with a startup when you're Verizon or whomever, right? And it's been tremendous. I kind of thought it was going to be like something I would do for a couple months. We're nearing our 200th episode. We've had everybody from the chief venturing officer at Pepsi to the chief, the CEO at Verizon to the CMO of MasterCard. So we've had like these really big, interesting people doing really interesting things come on and basically tell us how they think about innovation. Like, what's the next level of R&D? What's the space between R&D and M&A, and how does that work? And how are they structuring things? So it's been like the greatest hack for me personally, because less so biz dev, more so it's like getting an executive MBA in like innovation on the front lines. Yeah. So it's a really fun. It's very selfishly fun for me, and hopefully for the listeners too.
Yeah. So Fred, how would you summarize some of those maybe like key trends that you're hearing about from like on the enterprise side, around, beyond your massive consumption of ice cream, but like what are some of the trends that you're seeing as far as what people are, what bigger companies are looking for to get from startups, and even specifically around like AI, because that's obviously one of the topics near and dear to our heart.
Yeah, it's crazy interesting, right? So years ago, I had somebody say to me, the pace of change will never be slower than it is today. Meaning it's all like, we all feel like it's going so fast. It's only going to go faster. And so I think that realization is starting to permeate through the world, but also like enterprise C-suite where they're going, geez, man, everything's going so fast. AI particularly is a great example of it, but across everything. And there's a bunch of reasons for that we can talk about if you want. But essentially, you have innovation happening across the globe, right? Information is now available. So you can have a startup in Germany read something and go, oh, I have a way to solve for that. Let me go do this thing. And it's easy to start a startup. It's easy to do prototypes, to test, find product market fit, all these things. So it's become faster and easier to create something and see if it starts to go. And so because of that, I think large enterprises are starting to say, wait a second, no matter how smart our R&D team is, our engineers are, at best we can employ, X percentage of the smartest people in the world. Well, the other larger percentage is out there. So why wouldn't you tap into them if there's a way to kind of start on third base, right? And if you think of a startup, there's a problem that they wanted to solve. They quit their job. They're risking their livelihood to solve some problem that's so near and dear to them. And that's what they care about. And they're starting with a blank slate, which means they have none of the legacy headaches, none of the processes and procurement and protections and all the things a big company has, which is very important that they have it. So that startup's going to be able to go faster. And they're just going at that one piece, whereas the bigger company has to think about 40 pieces. And so what we try and do is say, hey, when you're thinking about this and like there's a problem you're trying to solve, there's probably a handful, pretty large handful of people in the world that are just thinking about that one little problem. So why are you going to start at zero? Why don't you start on third base where they are and collaborate with them in some way? And what does that look like? Could it be an investment? Sure. But it also could be a commercial deal, a joint development deal. It can be a commercial partnership. There's a lot of ways to structure these things. And so I think that realization went from sort of like a cute idea 10 years ago to now it's like a mission critical business objective. And it's really in between this R&D and M&A space where it's like, hey, we can move faster. We can augment our internal R&D with external. And what that relationship looks like can be all different things. So I think there's a more openness to this that is really exciting. I think one thing that's a pretty big macroeconomic thing happening is, I'm sure you guys have talked about it and hear about like the sort of challenges of raising money right now. The VC ecosystem is under a lot of pressure. I think that opens up a huge opportunity for corporates and enterprises because they're operating from a different vantage point. They don't need to go unicorn hunting. They need to find workhorses, right? They need somebody to solve their problem. And so if you're a startup founder, instead of being like, oh, I have to raise my seed round because then I have to raise my Series A and then my Series B. And every time I hear somebody talking that way, I'm like, you're not for me. Because the truth is like raising capital is like taking a loan. And so what you need to focus on is, do I have customers? Do I have a real business here that can scale? Are there a lot of potential customers? And yes, you may decide to take that loan. But anytime a founder is looking that route only, I'm like, hey, they're not focused on the business. They're focused on fundraising. And so I think corporates have this opportunity to come in and be like, hey, we can be your partner. We want to pay you for what you're doing, and fairly, by the way. And then, by the way, when you have that proof point, now you can go raise money at a totally different valuation,
right?
And you can get more deals. So it sort of works nicely.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I mean, just speaking from experience, I mean, it was a lot faster to convince customers to come in and fund what we were doing than have multiple meetings with VCs and go through, it seemingly was like a 6-month process when, if you're solving the right problem for the customer, it's usually a pretty quick close on that.
I love it. I was thinking about it. I remember going to try and get a line of credit from a bank, and like they basically were like, well, you have to have the money to get the line of credit. I'm like, well, that's why I'm here. It's like, I need the line of credit. Like if I had the money, why would I call you? And I sort of left that feeling of like, I just have to go get more deals. And like I did. And all of a sudden my bank is like, you have unlimited line of credit. And I'm like, oh, now you're coming, right? Like now I don't need you really. And actually that's the VC game to a certain extent. When you go in and you're like, here's my vision. They hold all the cards. Yeah. And like, also you're convincing them just like you would a customer. But the customer doesn't want equity. The customer doesn't want to take a stake. They don't want to tell you how to run your business. They just want you to do a service. And so there's a lot of upside. And I don't think, by the way, I think I'm very big. I venture in the name of our company. I love VCs. I'm not saying that model's broken. I just think that there's a disproportionate focus on raising money rather than making money.
Right. Yep. Yeah. I mean, so as you're working with a lot of the enterprises, are there specific areas they're really hotspots for AI right now? Where they're trying to solve some of these problems that maybe they haven't been able to yet, but are looking at AI in a really aggressive way to bring it into very specific parts of the company.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think of AI as sort of like the cloud or even the internet before it, right? Is like there's this moment where everyone's like, "Whoa, this is cool," and that happened last a year ago, January, where everyone goes, "Whoa, Gen AI came out of nowhere," and it's like, well, it's been developing for 40, 50 years, so not really out of nowhere, but yeah, I got it. And everyone's like, "Cool, I want to play with it. Like, let me go see if ChatGPT can write my website, like in the voice of Sesame Street," and it does it, and it's like mind blown. Okay, awesome. And now all of a sudden you're having this moment of like, okay, well, so what's the real business case here? And so I think you're seeing, especially on the enterprise side, people going, okay, how does this help me in my verticals, right? And I mentioned the Comcast Accelerator. It's around vertical AI, which is like vertical business cases, like real, like, can this drive sales? Can this help me with my marketing? Can this help me with, insert any of the business verticals that are out there? And so I think what's happening, if 2023 was like the year of Gen AI, like jumped onto the map, 2024 is going to be the year of like figuring out what the business use cases are that can scale. Just the same way like Salesforce sort of became, out of the cloud came Salesforce, right? Or AWS or whoever. I think you're starting to see that happening where there's real players, that it's not about building, okay, the large language model or the, having the chip power. Those companies are going to be gigantic also, by the way. But it's like, okay, can I solve a privacy concern that all the companies are worried about? Can I clean everybody's data? Can I create some sort of monetizable assistant? I think you're starting to see the true business side of Gen AI come into light.
So Fred, we met, I don't know, a year and a half ago now, and it was when I was at VF Corporation, and you were helping us find entrepreneurs. And so we were doing we'd have like a pitch where, entrepreneurs would come in. We'd start with like a group of I'd say like a list of 60 and maybe like 20 would come in. But that means you are scanning probably hundreds or more of entrepreneurs. So curious, and specifically the AI space, what are the qualities that you look for an entrepreneur or an early business that you feel is going to be successful? So what are some of those things you look for?
Yeah, you nailed it. Like we look at least 200 to get to 2. That's sort of the math when we end up looking at it, which makes me, by the way, either the most interesting like dinner companion or the worst.
Dating a lot. You're dating way too much, Fred. This is.
Oh, dude, my wife always is like, you are so annoying. Like, no matter what anyone says, you're like, oh, there's a startup that does X, Y, Z. So I have to watch myself on that. But I actually think this, like, what criteria piece is what is our secret sauce as an organization. We actually look at 8 different. We call it the 8 Ps, which is not that exciting, but it's like a rubric, right, to analyze every startup. And there's a whole bunch of things there that are very unique to whoever our corporate partner is. So while we met looking at VF Foundry, right, that was looking at very specific types of startups to do very specific.
More outdoor, not very kind of technical in a lot of ways.
Totally, right? But like even like a company that you guys got excited about would be very different to REI, which might be a competitor, right? Because the problem set is different. So we spend a lot of time thinking about what the outcome is you want. And so we use that as one filter. But like more generally, I would say, do they have product market fit? Is there a there? Like, is there an opportunity for them to commercialize standalone, not worrying about the VC side of things? Does the founding team have that sort of ability to overcome obstacles? Like, are they in it for the right reasons? Like, running a startup is hard. It is. I mean, this is at least my 3rd one, depending on how you think about it. And it is, there are things that come up every day that you don't want to deal with. And so are they in it for the right reasons? Do they have a burning personal attachment to this idea and this company? That tends to separate them. And then we look at reasons to believe. who's their founding team, who are they, who are their clients. I love to see that they have somebody that has written them a check to do whatever it is they're trying to do, because that there's a amount of due diligence and validation there. And then if somebody has written them a second check, then we're starting to play in a different level. If we have to look really early, it tends to be a different, we have to look at different things to validate that, but I'm always looking for reasons to believe. And is this idea scalable? Are they able to do something if it gets bigger?
Yeah. Is there anything like specific to AI that you're looking for?
Yeah, we actually doubled down on the, like, is there a monetizable like business here? There's so much cool stuff. I mean, I've seen like things that, I run upstairs. We're joking that I'm in my basement, right? My home office. I will run upstairs and like tell my wife, like, oh my gosh, I just saw this thing. It's amazing. She's like, what is anyone going to do with that? I'm like, I have to go back downstairs, right? Like there's no answer to it. So I think part of it is like, is there product market fit for what it is that people will pay for? Yeah. And then is whatever the solution is better and like by a lot than what a Microsoft, an Amazon, one of the big players is going to come out with? Because as a startup, you have a lot of advantages. You can move fast, you can iterate, you can be more user-friendly. There's all these things, but like at the end of the day, most enterprise buyers of these types of things don't want to take a lot of risk.
Yeah.
And our job is to push them out of that comfort zone and say, hey, by the way, all your competitors are working with Microsoft. So like, you're going to get no differentiation here. Like if you truly want to win and make this an area you're going to win in, then you have to do something different. So we're always pushing and fighting that fight, but I'm also looking like, can I justify that the risk reward is in line?
Fred, are there specific like startups or ways that they're using AI to solve problems that are novel, unique, super interesting? I don't know how much kind of secrecy you're under, but yeah. I don't know if there were specific things that, are just, out there in the public view. Yeah. But I mean, that you were, because you're at the tip of the spear where you get to see not only startups that are coming through the pipe and through the funnel, but also kind of the matchmaking on that product market fit for an enterprise. But like, what are some of those things that made you run upstairs?
Yeah. I mean, there's one that in my background was in sales. And so there's a company called Sales. It's SAILES. So more like sailboat vibe, but it's like a cobot for business development. And so the idea of like customizing your emails to people, finding the right people to reach out to, organizing that information, making sure you don't spam them, making sure you don't write them too many emails, right? There's all these like sales business development services, right? That are just like, hey, we're going to spam all your potential clients. And you're like, no, that's horrible. I don't want to do that. And so this is like almost like having a sales apprentice or assistant that's all generative AI based. That one to me like was like, oh my gosh, like of course this should exist. And that's a very interesting, tangible outcome, right? You pay a certain amount, and if it develops deals for you, like, man, there you go. It pays for itself, right? So you could see organizations getting very hot on something like that very quickly. On the flip, there's a company called Reality Defender that just kind of blows my mind, mostly for what they prevent. They're essentially identifying deep fakes across everything, audio, video, text. And a lot of people are like, oh, whatever, I can figure it out. And it's like, the ability for generative AI to create believable content is so mind-blowing, and how little it takes. I've seen the founder do a demonstration of like taking 8 seconds of me talking. So this podcast, I'm ruined, right? Someone could take my voice, replicate it to the point that they could get through my bank authentication voice calling my bank to make a deposit or a withdrawal, right? Obviously not a deposit, to make a withdrawal. And so, but these guys, like, I don't know if you remember, like 6 months ago, there was like a deep fake of like an attack on the Pentagon. And when it happened, there was like $1 trillion of market value that went out of the stock market because people were freaking out that there was an attack. Yeah. It was totally fake. And these guys instantly knew that it was a fake with their technology. So I think AI to fight AI is a pretty interesting sort of area. And then the other one that just is a personal one for me is a company called Clean Labs. They just raised 25 million, or I guess they raised it not too long ago. But it's basically cleaning up data, using AI to clean up your data set. And the way I always equate it is like Sarah is currently in my CRM as being at VF Foundry. Like there's no way I went in and changed her to her new job, right? And so anything that I do and with my data to target or think about like looking at trends within my data is going to be wrong, right? It's going to say Sarah's all over my website, and like meanwhile she's researching for this, and so they're able to use AI to clean all of that across all different applications. So those are three that just kind of jump to mind, and then there's all sorts of nefarious ones that are creating echo chambers of news where essentially it can take the same news story and tell it to you differently than me based on our like browser history, which of course makes it stickier and makes us pay more attention to it and like it more, and also just creates like the ultimate echo chamber.
So some of those things you're talking about may cause anxiety in some folks. You know, we've had conversations with different folks within organizations, and you know that there's anxiety around bringing AI into an organization. There's also, you know, lack of literacy around you know, AI tools. So curious, like, how do you, when you're thinking about, you know, matchmaking a new generative AI startup with a large organization that may have some of this anxiety, how do you overcome that? And what kind of conversations do you have with these companies?
Yeah, it's an awesome question. And Sarah, I was joking with you that that's actually the subject of, I'm speaking at a conference called Shop Talk around managing and mitigating the risks of generative AI for corporates. And that, so I'm ready to talk about it because I just prepped my deck.
He's going to share screen.
Yeah, well, can I share? I've got a QR code. Are you guys ready? No. The truth of the matter is, like, this isn't that different than Facebook coming up, like out of nowhere, right? Like, you both are probably too young for that, right? But like when it became like this corporate thing, people
too
were like,
young. No way. I think it was like 2006, maybe 7.
You had a couple kids by then.
Yeah.
5 under 3 or whatever. Anyway, so I think that what's interesting is like there was general freak out of like, I'm not going to put my brand on this thing. What is this thing? It's just for college kids. Nobody cares, right? Or think of like even more pronounced social influencers. I can't let an influencer talk about Nike. I'm Nike. I control my brand. I tell stories. I'm never going to let somebody do that. And now, meanwhile, they've got like thousands of influencers now talking about it. So I think anytime something new is there, there's going to be an immediate fear moment. Nobody likes change. Nobody wants to, everyone says they want to try new things unless it impacts their business, right? And so they're like, hold on a second. And in this case, they're not wrong. There's legit risks. There's a lot going on. But there's huge opportunities. And so, you know, what we try and say is like, this is a human problem. So you have to get people playing with this, right? And there's a lot of safe ways to do that where they start to experience what's possible and you kind of open the aperture. So that's step one. Then you need to create like a sandbox or a ring fence or something where you can start to test this in a way that is not scary to your business. And if I had to give you like sort of like a framework, I would say step one is to learn, then is to test, then is to build, and then invest. And the learn is like, understand what this is, like really start to study it, have somebody on our team do a cross-functional thing, right? To figure out, is this real? Where do we want to play? What are the potential? Then you want to test it small. I would recommend doing that with startups in some sort of, safe space. So there's very little risk. You mitigate that risk there, and then you build. And that's where you start to do co-development. You go, oh, what is my unique sauce here? I'll take a little bit of this one, a little bit of that one, and I'm going to build something that works for my organization. And then the last piece is invest. And that doesn't mean write a check to a startup. You don't need to be like a VC, but more so investing time, resources, and effort to scaling what worked from that build phase.
Well, last question. How do you see generative AI intersecting with the dairy industry? Because you seem to know a lot about it.
That is an awesome question. So
It's going to be utterly amazing.
There it is. Utterly
There it is.
amazing.
Yeah.
You're going to have to move this one up, right? So, yeah, I could go for a while. I think that it's really cool in terms of like startups that made me go upstairs. We've seen a couple now of startups that are looking at unique combinations of ingredients that you wouldn't expect, right? That are based on the flavor profiles, the texture, and starting to really come up with like really powerful ideas for new products and new businesses, right? And that could be health benefits, like by combining this dairy with this probiotic, you can create something great for gut health. Or it can be flavors, right, that you don't think of, go back to the old Reese's peanut butter days, right? Of like, oh, chocolate and peanut butter together, what a great idea. But on steroids, right? What's the next level of that? I think AI intersects there. I think AI plays a huge role, and we're seeing it in the sort of sustainability story, which California is sort of leading that in the dairy industry. Of like, how do you make it regenerative? How do you capture waste? All the different sort of upstream and upcycling opportunities there. You see it from the brand standpoint, right? So you can actually say, okay, I've created a new chocolate peanut butter ice cream, and I'm a Latino founder, and I want to make sure that it is focused on the Hispanic population in Southern California. Help me come up with a name, a logo, a brand, spin up my first draft of a website, right? Like all that, like that now, right? So I think there's going to be this sort of deluge of innovation happening that can both be, kind of fun, but also very meaningful when you talk about like the actual ingredients and the sustainability side of things, and the future of packaging. And there's all sorts. It's pretty interesting to see how all these worlds are intersecting.
I love it. It wasn't necessarily a really serious question, but that was an awesome answer.
Dude, I'm always serious when it comes to dairy.
I'm like, why are you running upstairs? What is upstairs?
I mean, totally. That's all the ice cream's upstairs.
Well, this has been an awesome conversation, Fred. Thank you so much for joining us. So where can our listeners find out more about you and follow along with VentureFuel?
Yeah, I would love it. So it's venturefuel.net. 10 years ago, I incorporated the business, and somebody was squatting on venturefuel.com, and I refused to buy it from them. So I still have .net, but I love it. You can get to us there. LinkedIn, I'm super active there. And then the VentureFuel Visionaries is the podcast. And it's anybody that's interested in sort of this intersection of VC, corporate, and startup. That's the theme. We publish just about every week with a new guest. So would love for people to check that out.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was great to meet you, Fred. And make sure you put us on your ice cream subscription list whenever you get the next
ice cream distribution list.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
I had no idea we were going to be so dairy focused on this.
Hey, it's one of the perks of the job. I'd be happy to get you guys some innovative ice creams.
Awesome. I love it.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Fred.
Well, Chad, that was a fun interview. I think Fred is an awesome human. What are some of your takeaways from that interview?
Yeah. First takeaway was I should drink more milk
That's
or
what I
eat
was
more
thinking,
ice cream.
like-
It was very dairy focused. I was not prepared at all.
Yeah, I know.
No,
that was my fault. I brought that up.
It's all good. It's all good. So I think, while I know Fred has to be very secretive of the particular companies and solutions that companies are looking for to solve with AI, it was very clear that, AI is going to help solve all of these different things across functions, business problems, all those kinds of things. And, I can't think of another technology that has been able to do that or has had that type of impact. Mm-hmm. So it's really interesting that, it is already impacting like all those different facets. The second one is how important matchmaking is. I think as enterprises are trying to find those problems that they're trying to solve, using a company like Fred's, which I don't know if I did a disservice with calling it like Tinder for like enterprises and startups, but I think the matchmaking is really important to understand. How do you build quick trust with with more of a startup type company, who's trying to develop a solution to your problem. So those, that group feels extremely integral into that process. So if you're an enterprise looking for those solutions, or you're a startup who has those solutions, VentureFuel seems like a great place to start to find some of those, find that match.
Yeah, I had the pleasure of working with VentureFuel when I worked in the venture space, when we were looking for founders and kind of early stage companies. They were the matchmaker for us at VF Corporation, and it was just really interesting too to hear from his side. And I had conversations with him about it before, but like how many entrepreneurs they need to talk to, and how many businesses he has sight to at any given time, specifically also in the AI space. So it was just cool to hear a little bit more about the process and kind of what happens there, having been a client of his as well.
Yeah.
Well, that's going to do it for this episode of AI Powered by People. The show is produced by Steve Berkowitz and brought to you by Verve. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back next Tuesday.